Mary Minock is an accomplished poet and memoirist. Some writers have a loose connection to their city of origin or their environment, and some are quite closely related to it. Uh, Mary embeds Detroit in both her poems and her memoirs. She really draws us in so that we can live with her, we can live the experience of what she's writing about. She got her start in poetry, and her first book of poems was Love in the Upstairs Flat, published in 1995. And she was publishing in the meantime in Driftwood Review, The MacGuffin, a Detroit area magazine, and Margie. In 2007 and 2011, she won the Spring-Fed Arts Award in prose for the early versions of her first memoir, The Way Back Room. And that book has gotten quite a bit of notice. I first knew Mary through the Society for the Study of Midwestern Literature. We've been showing up there almost every year for maybe 15 or 20 years. We have readings, and I have had plenty of chance to hear her read her poetry. She has a new book, A Time When You Know a House, Poems of Detroit. And that book brings her life and experience up to date. She has taught English at Wayne State University, where she got her doctorate, and also at Madonna College. Let's welcome Mary Minock.
This is fascinating. I can't hear you clapping, but I can see you clapping. First of all, I want to thank David and Ed and Lissa for inviting me and running this meeting and doing everything that needs to be done. I'm going to read memoir and poetry, mostly the new book, but I understand there may be some fiction or some prose writers here, and sometimes the memoir and the poetry book complement each other. You don't need the other to read one. And if I don't talk loud enough, do something like, do something to make me talk louder. I'm trying to finish the sentence in a witty way. I'm finding that on Zoom, sometimes I don't hear as well as I should, and I don't speak as loudly as I should, but don't suffer in silence. So I'm going to start with part of a memoir, because it introduces some information that you probably should know. And it comes from The Way Back Room. And it's in the second chapter. On September 18th, 1951, exactly 4 months after Daddy died, Mama received her signed certificate of selection to sell Avon. She was given a territory of 120 customers in the area north of Toledo Street, between Junction and Livernois Avenues, a not very wealthy neighborhood that abutted the raised viaduct of the Grand Trunk Railroad. The neighborhood was home to a mix of Southerners, Mexicans, Maltese, but mostly Polish, who spilled over from St. Hedwig's Parish. Her territory was a little more than half a mile from home. Even though Mama didn't smoke, she started using Avon Smoker's toothpaste. Her teeth gleamed. It was remarkably good stuff. She set off with white-toothed optimism just as I went back to school after lunch. It was the first time I saw her smile broadly since before Daddy got sick, even if the smile came from Avon. Like her friend Smitty, I wanted her to do well. The trouble, as I saw it from looking at the training manuals and the brochures she got for each campaign, was that Mama just didn't look the part. The Avon ladies in the pictures were young and thin and wore up-to-date hairdos. Mama was not so young, was getting noticeably fatter, her hair was graying, and she wore it in a 1940s style with a big puff of it rolled straight back from her forehead with the French braids in the back. And she wouldn't wear the Avon hat, which looked similar to one of those elongated Boy Scout caps that folded flat. Folded flat. When you open them to put them on your head, there's a typo in here. The hat didn't work, so the green leather kit would have to be the only Avon mark. During the first few weeks when I got home from school, Mama was usually back from working her territory, already discouraged. Her feet hurt or something came up, or it got cold, or she didn't get very far. I was only able to do 1 block of Brandon, she said slowly. She wasn't smiling. When I went with her on Saturday to deliver the orders and supposedly to sell more, I saw her mistakes. She never wore much makeup herself, mostly just Avon's powder pack foundation. She wore lipstick and a little rouge, but never applied eye makeup. In fact, Mama held a fairly rigid, old-fashioned idea of how painted a woman's face ought to be. When Mrs. Alcantor wanted to try the line of eyeshadows, Mama said, I don't think you need to wear eye makeup. You look just fine without it. And what if that stuff gets in your eye? If Mrs. Corona said she wanted 3 lipstick, Mama said, do you really need 3? You know, you might just want to stick with the pink rose and crimson beauty for now. That should be enough. If Mrs. Cernacki's order cost too much in Mama's mind, Mama went over it again with Mrs. Cernacki. You know, Helen, that's all going to amount to $9.92, and I haven't even added the sales tax. Are you sure you don't want to skip the beauty dust? Mama's fear of spending money was projected onto everyone. Although discouraged at first, a few months later, Mama began returning home a little later and a little brighter. She'd been talking to Mrs. Vella on Hammond Street. Then it was Mrs. Lopez on Manson, or Mrs. Ferrens on Federal, or Mrs. Epplett on Plummer. She couldn't cover 2 houses in her territory without being invited in for tea or pie, coffee, scones, potato salad, or pierogies. Mrs. Gazorik makes real pierogies, she told me. You should taste them. At Mrs. Vella's, she tried Maltese squid, and I heard her telling my Aunt Kay about it on the phone. It was good, not rubbery like I thought it would be. At Mrs. Hernandez's house, she tried authentic Mexican enchiladas. They were good and they really are not that spicy. She made it to the 6th house on Federal and got invited in to talk.
Excuse me, Mary. There's some reverberation. I wonder if you could be just a little closer to the mic.
Okay, I can.
Yeah. Perhaps that will give us a better resonance. Yeah.
Okay. At Mrs. Hernandez's house, she tried authentic Mexican enchiladas. They were good and they're really not that spicy. She made it to the 6th house on Federal and got invited in to talk. The friendly women in her territory enjoyed consoling the new widow with the beautiful smile and lovely skin. She met so many people who wished her well. She experienced the insides of so many houses that wore their culture like a badge on their sleeves. She started learning the census of nationalities on each block. 3 houses Polish, then 1 Italian, 1 Maltese, 1 Southern, 2 Mexican, 2 Polish, again 1 Irish, and again 2 Maltese. She ate her way to a kind of international awareness, and sometimes her hostesses bought Avon. Okay, now some poems. Detroit's 250th birthday, 1951. In July, we ride the bus downtown to celebrate the birthday of the city, just Mama and me alone. Mama tries to be brave. She must feel lonely in the crowd. It's our first outing after the funeral. It's 2 months after Daddy's funeral when the float with the birthday cake rolls down Woodward Avenue with Miss America waving to the crowd. The rosebud cake looks big enough to feed the city, but it's made of paper mache. Brave among the laughing families, Mama and I stand alone. Mama talks differently to me now that we are alone. She started talking that way after the funeral. Without me as her companion, she can't be brave. She smiles today, even as we ride downtown, and tells me how much she loves the city as we join the others in the swelling crowd. Mayor Cobo, President Truman speak to the crowd. They say Detroit is in a class alone. They tell us other things about the city I don't understand, grown-up talk like at the funeral. Even after dark, we stay downtown and sit on the grass by the river and are brave. A breeze blows off the streets and we are brave as we watch the dancers entertain the crowd. The Empress of Detroit breaks out of a pea pod, steps down from the stage in a gown of sequins to stand alone. If Daddy wasn't the dead man at the funeral, he'd enjoy this birthday party for the city. Daddy said he'd hitched his star to the city. Mama knows that. That's why she's so brave, joining the celebration soon after the funeral. Mama explains the costume people in the crowd. Cadillac, Chief Pontiac, Red Coat soldiers, but I keep names alone. Daddy worked at Cadillac, owned a Pontiac, drove us downtown. Cadillac parked his canoe downtown to found the city. Mama and I are all alone, walking toward the bus, braving crowds, the summer after Daddy's funeral. Did you notice that that's a sestina? Lost in Song. Mama was moved by songs of love in Romance languages. Vaya con Dios, my darling, the melody that sets the path of gone and nevermore. And I was a savant of lyrics and memorized them quickly after only 1 week on your hit parade. Such travel they offered in my mind, exotic places born on catchy tunes. Hernando's hideaway where you could knock 3 times and whisper low that you and I were sent by Joe, or Monterey in old Mexico, where stars and steel guitars and luscious lips as red as wine broke somebody's heart, or to a pawn shop on the corner in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but I ain't got a thing left to hawk. And then it didn't seem like we were only fragments of a family, just me and Mama gazing into the little Admiral, for we knew all the songs and sang them all. She taught me Begin and Tropical Splendor and harmonized in her clear alto. She translated the foreign words I didn't know. May God go with you, my love. It's nice to see you. I'm reading and can't see you until I look up. This describes something that probably none of you have experienced because we were old-fashioned and we had old-fashioned things around the house, but maybe your grandparents will remember this. It's called Letting the Fire Go Out. Those days the park was cold, white beyond the white foil curtains. The snow tracked on the inside stairway marks my trail of coming home from school. That snow and a grainy swirl of it at the corner of the doorway down below. My boots that latched like firemen's with fake fur borders lie at the top of the steps, one sliding one way, one the other. The cold snow makes no puddles. It will not melt. The fire is low. All my mother asks of me is to keep the fire going. I am 9 years old and Tan 11. We are old-fashioned, the only ones who keep the ritual. Coal truck pulling up, wheelbarrow or conveyor belt, coal chute, loud spill, dark bin, and curious boys from the neighborhood. Everyone else had converted to gas. On the October day the truck arrives, she goes down to greet them, loud greetings, public process all around. I always hide against the heat register in the bathroom. I pray the winter will be mild, for if it's not, they'll fill the bin again in February. And then on bitter afternoons after school, there is danger of the fire going out. I've been told how to fix it. 5 good shakes of the handle of the monster furnace, 3 shovels full of coal banked on left or right, whichever way is opposite to her way of the morning. Then open the lower door, shovel out the ashes and the fallen clinkers, fill the water chamber from the bucket. All will keep it going, but it's loud, and the ones in the flat below have a furnace converted to gas. I cannot sneak down the back stairway past the sounds of the lady in the downstairs kitchen, cooking normal meals, making normal sounds of cleaning up and pleasing. I cringe against the heat register, wishing we had a new furnace, wishing we had someone else to fix it, and it wasn't me, this girl in training to obey my mother once. I am a bad girl. I will press against the ebbing. I will let the fire go out. At 5:30, she'll be home and she'll feel it, even on the stairway. Did you fix the furnace? Did you let the fire go out? Okay, I have a snippet from my memoir. The title of the chapter is St. Mary of Detroit. And I have a kind of a wry introduction to a poem I'm going to read. In 3rd grade, I listened to Sister Elizabeth Ann's gentle stories of the saints. In 4th grade, I listened to Sister Florita's warrior stories of the saints and learned what I thought was all the rules for avoiding sin. I longed for someone to tell me what to do and punish me if I did wrong. I longed for brothers and sisters to become a secure and loyal child in a large family, our Lord and our Blessed Mother and all that sprang from our Lord's church provided an elaborate hierarchy of authority and the largest family imaginable with hundreds of heroic saints to emulate. If I became a saint, that would make the saints my sisters and brothers. I would stand beside them in heaven, St. Mary of Detroit. On earth, I would follow the saints' examples, the saints who found a reason for their suffering, who turned it into deliberate acts of devotion, who found joy in their devotion. I wanted to be like St. Rose of Lima, to sleep on broken glass. I wanted the sense of humor and sharp wit of St. Lawrence, who suggested to his torturers burning him on the pyre, turn me over, I'm done on that side. I wanted to be an early Christian martyr. So I have a poem. I have several poems, hard to shake, but I have several poems that poke fun at our rituals and who let you know that I was serious about them all. So I have this one poem I'm going to read. It's set on the page with one side on the left margin and one side on the right margin. So I'm going to just kind of wave to let you see that when I read it. And this is a true story. The time I took Patsy Walker up to Holy Redeemer to pray for sinners and to sit in awe in that big Romanesque amber candlelight of a gray March afternoon in a one true and only holy apostolic church with her and her little hillbilly hiccup and clearing of her throat with her Protestant residual from a grandmother, like a Lord's Prayer like an Our Father called a Lord's Prayer with extra unnecessary words and only one other now I lay me down to sleep prayer beside. Like Kool-Aid at that Baptist wedding Mama took me to on 4th Street with little stingy sandwiches and bride in a white suit instead of a long train gown. And didn't she even have a hat, let alone a veil? And it sure didn't last long, not much to it. And saw Patsy's big blue Protestant child eyes open wider than my eyes because of course I was used to it. And to hear Mrs. Mulray practicing an Agnus Dei on the organ, trying to get at some measure, something on the organ, something in the stops, and taught her the sign of the cross. And she's so game, devout, aping me and even the ladies there to light candles, dipping their hands into the holy water on a Saturday afternoon with the weather warming and it being the third or fourth Saturday in Lent, I don't remember which. And all of us knowing the dark time would be coming to an end and hallelujah, he has risen. And then Mrs. Mulroy would be pulling out all the stops. Was the day I knew I was making progress, would be storing up some grace in heaven, returning one, the first of many I'd return to do my part to amend the mess that Martin Luther made by not being patient. Not to mention he later married a nun and it would have to be in a Protestant ceremony with God knows what refreshments, although in those days they didn't have Kool-Aid. And Patsy had a conversion before my eyes, like coming home to magic. And sure it was, with all the side altars and the Infant of Prague in the corner, along with a pair of crutches on the side of St. Joseph's altar that I'd never seen before and didn't see again and wondered about, but I could explain it, for it must have been a miracle, the lame walking. And I knew that I could do it myself if I need be. I didn't need to be a priest to do it. I baptize thee in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. If only I had water, not grape juice or beer or the highballs that filled so many glasses at a Catholic wedding. Or Protestant, could you believe it, Kool-Aid at a wedding? Cheap. And Mama saying, well, you know, the Baptists don't drink, but I thought at a wedding at least. But then the wedding was over and Mama and I were leaving and Mama and walking home and Mama calculating the cost of the pillowcases and the sheets and saying, cheap. And the cake was a mix. And well, I'm still hungry. So we stopped at that Greasy Spoon on Junction and 4th Street for a nice hamburger. And I was so glad I was part of the one true and only. And poor Patsy never even went to church at all before I started her on the course to conversion, she being my best friend. That has enough words that I don't have to read the other devout poems. But I have one that I wrote that zooms up to the present time. And it's called Fallen Ways. I speak of the young Catholics of the 1960s who each chose their moment to defy like Lucifer and say, I will not serve, who launched themselves from the orbit of stricture to come down through the heady atmosphere of the end of adolescence to catch the breeze of freedom. I love the way we chucked it all, questioned authority, laughed at our priest-plagued nun-schooled years of wringing out our lily white souls, obsessively examining them for stains and filthy little sins. When we ceased to pray to God, we found some agency inside ourselves to act for peace and justice. We worked to still our self-hating voices. We walked in the ways of Zen, yet our hearts never really left home. Our hearts are a cabal of black-robed Jesuit priests, arguing in the night about moral dilemmas, sly, deft debating, building airy bridges of logic to reach the right thing from a common set of principles. And then our hearts are pedantic little children, proudly reciting lines from the Baltimore Catechism. We have learned to hide and bear our loneliness. We sit in rows at funerals, envious of faithful cousins who sing heartily, respond promptly, having memorized nuances of the latest English translations. We took the rougher road and ended up in the vanguard, and it is we who most miss the litanies, the Latin. Here's one about the neighborhood. I have 20 more minutes. This is called The End of the Day Shift. Timken Roller Bearing in Axle, Detroit, 1958. At 4 o'clock, the whistle blows and men stream out from all the gates of Timken's. They separate themselves to file in lines directly to the bar rooms that in those days claimed each corner of the intersection of Ford and Clark Streets. Their faces are gray, their walk restrains a wish to run, their eyes are urgent. From across the wide street, I watch their processions. They scare me some. To look at them directly seems to violate a kind of privacy. I am just a schoolgirl waiting for a bus downriver. But listening to the women of the neighborhood, I know already I want to marry a man who works the day shift. Their faces are masked, feelings are hidden, restrain a common understanding of the work they've finished for the day. The weight of it, the patience, the song or jingle in the mind's ear, in counterpoint to the pounding, the eyes that stayed put, concentrating on the task, the legs that stayed still while the arms reached to take and touch the object, change it perceptibly, then let it pass. These men strive for dignity, and it is the guessing game for me. What would be the way to love one? In the art museum, high above factory scenes, are women painted on the walls, round as embryos within embryos. They are cups, bowls that hold fruit. They keep secret the hours when the masks are taken down and gray faces color with laughter. I wish we were live. This is another one from almost the same period, 1955. I wrote this one. I had it in me for years, but it seems that sometimes people don't understand how Detroit got emptied, not totally emptied, thank God, of white people. And it wasn't because of the riot in '67, that was way later. The Dream of the Suburbs, 1955. In those days in the neighborhood was the dream of leaving it. Escape to the northwest side, brick houses with working screen doors, aluminum grills with curlicues to ban them belaying. A mailman works the beat and birds chirp quietly. The dream of Dearborn, the streets offer more than plumbing supplies and used furniture. There are dress shops and diversions, bowling alleys and miniature golf, a youth center, a little city hall with a cornice like an A&P, a swimming pool. The houses are laid out for normal people. No dark hallways, no steep stairs, no moldy cellars. A 3-bedroom ranch house in Inkster, a picture window, all for only $9,999, and $99 moves you in. The bliss of the suburbs, the reasonability, the shopping plazas, where you could go from store to store, a fat green Cunningham's drugstore on the corner, bigger than the Cunningham's on Junction, withered and shrunken to hold the little we had to buy. No warehouses at the end of the street, no pounding out of tin at Timkins, no smell of tobacco in the early morning from the Scott and Dillon plant, no trucks shuttering down the street, no cutting of trees in the park, no closures of swimming pool for lack of chlorine and polio season, no migrations of new people, no threat of the poor moving in to replace the ones who got their dream 10 miles away, no bums from Skid Row coming our way down Burner Highway. Oh, ranch house, oh, 3 doors to open directly on 3 separate bedrooms, or laps of 3 bright colored wall-to-wall carpets, oh, vacuum cleaner of many implements, oh, windows that work, oh, fenced backyard with disciplined little trees, oh, suburb, oh, sameness, no peeling paint, no passageway, no junk rooms to hide. There would be new dresses with price tags to show to the neighbors. The women would have time for coffee. The women would talk about sales on lamps, stockpiles of canned goods and saran wrap. The women would be wise about colors. The women would have painted nails. The women would use mops and electric mixer and Loretta Young skirts instead of hands and knees in rosebud zippered house dresses. The women would wait for men who worked in suits and were gone all day. No split shifts, no afternoons, no night shifts, no heavy wrists holding beer cans on the table. Oh, suburb, dinner at 6. The man, the newspaper, the boys on shiny bicycles arrive at once, hungry and civilized and feedable. The dream of the suburbs. After they were gone, we were lonely. We kept our time by the season. We rose in the morning, we settled in the evening with the sparrows and the pigeons and looked to the river. I'm going to speed up a little. Okay, I might come back to some of these. I've got part of a memoir that's called 1960 Awakenings. And in my memoir, 4 things happened in the year 1960, and I was, I think, in 10th grade. First off, I saw the film On the Beach about nuclear war, became a pacifist forever. Eichmann was caught, and I had to deal with learning stuff I'd never known. One of the girls in class gave a speech about classical music. I got hooked and it carried me off. And then at the end of August or early September, John Kennedy came. He was a senator then, to kick off his campaign. And the whole chapter goes on, but I pulled out to excerpt. I'm just going to paraphrase, nothing much to paraphrase, but my girlfriend Trina and I we used to walk downtown. We walked downtown and were in the crowd and heard the speech. And this morning I read this to see if I could read it well, and it brought me to tears. It's the words of John Kennedy. I have come today from Alaska, America's last frontier, to Michigan to state the case for America's new frontier. Goose pimples crawled up the sides of my stomach and settled in my nipples. Such verbal eloquence, the metaphor already dear to my heart. I saw myself as the daughter of the Appalachian frontier, medical care for the aged, a minimum wage of $1.25. America would be the first in the world and the first in the fight for peace. The sandy red-haired senator looked younger than any of our classmates' parents. He spoke clearly, relentlessly, beating out the measures of the cadence of his speech with his right hand. I take my case to the American people because I am confident that the American people want to bring an end to racial discrimination everywhere, in the schools, in the homes, in the churches, in the lunch counters. I want every American free to stand up for his rights, even if sometimes he has to sit down for them. He talked about collective bargaining, about workers' rights, about economics, about the balance of power with Russia and the Chinese. He gave the germ of what would become his most quoted line from his inaugural address. The new frontier, he said, is not what I promise I'm going to do for you. The new frontier is what I ask you to do for our country. Give me your help, your hands, your voice, and this country can move again. The crowd cheered and the birds flew up. I looked over at Trina, whose eyes were shining like mine. With the speech over, Kennedy and his entourage moved to walk back to the Sheraton Cadillac Hotel where they had stayed the night. Most of the crowd was scattering, but Trina and I followed the Kennedy entourage, watching brightly colored banners of the campaign workers and supporters, watching the line of Kennedy girls. When the crowd turned the corner just in front of the hotel, it shifted, and Trina and I, who had been far in the rear, were suddenly thrust into the front. As John Kennedy walked into the hotel, waving and grinning from ear to ear, he passed no more than 6 feet from us. We were 6 feet away from the soon-to-be President of the United States. None of the television speeches of Kennedy, none of the newsreel footage, none of the portraits matched with any precision the mobility of Kennedy in person. A new day had dawned, and I would have followed him anywhere. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking of now. Okay. On the Livernois bus, November 1963. Where did you go, middle-aged woman, on the Livernois bus going southward, who told me of your husband's suicide one November afternoon in 1963, the day before I turned 19? I was a sophomore then, going home from classes, when you got on at Puritan, sat beside me in my favorite window seat, and rode with me until McGraw, where you got off, possibly comforted by my rapt attention. I was not inured to the honor you gave me, as I practiced that day, becoming the woman I was striving hard to be, generous, gentle, trustworthy, discreet, a fellow traveler who could sense a tragedy, listen in a hush without judgment. I thought about our encounter, especially since in those days my mind was fired by will and consciousness, my own tragedies soon enough to pass into the recess of childhood, further and further behind me. I would invent myself as a happy woman going somewhere, open to the world with all its sadness. I thought about our encounter, beyond Christian charity, more existential, beyond self-righteous pity. For that reason, I never mentioned it to anyone. It was the silence I loved in me, and perhaps a little gesture of the body, shifting like a picnic bench, a bicycle, a bus seat, available to accept a burden. Silence was important. After all, a bench or seat does not smile and tell you, that's what I'm here for. A week later, I rode the same bus in not surprised when the first woman who got on at Fankel was crying while I lowered my eyes to be discreet. And then the man at Fullerton sniffling into a handkerchief, all the way down Plymouth Joy Road past St. Cecilia's, Grand River Warren, Tyerman, all the way down to the neighborhood, almost to the river, the bus filled up with weeping. Somehow in my self-absorption, I couldn't intuit a common cause of grief. I would walk home to study for a test in moral philosophy, annoyed by the unusual volume of the downstairs neighbor's TV, some frantic male commentator whose voice I couldn't make out. Later, after Mama got home, we stood weeping in each other's arms. Where did you go? I looked for you through that bleak winter, but never saw you again. In April, I bought the neighbor's car, rode the bus only rarely after that. Here's an old poem that I had published in the Lansing newspaper back in 1971 or something. And it's a small poem. I had kept it. And then I thought, well, just for old time's sake, I'm going to put it in the book. And I had to take out some profanity because back in 1971, I was more profane than I am now. After the riot, 1967, a Mercury so clean, honest, you wouldn't believe, a man and woman front seat opposite, middle age. She wears a pillbox hat, drives so slow down 14th and so wide you can't get around them, while she points out ruins and his head stares straight ahead. It's August now. I never saw the sky so blue at sunset. I better do this fast. Let's see, it's 7:48. I think I'll do the longer one. Okay, this one is called Upon Falling into Blue Heron Lagoon, 2 weeks before my 70th birthday, Belle Isle Park, Detroit. Maneuvering at water's edge, the final post of a chain link fence that separates the wilds from a golf course, I grabbed a branch on the bank for balance as I swung around. It gave, and I floated down to the water in a whirl of yellow leaves with the distant sound of traffic in the bright November sunshine. I immediately started to laugh. Falling backwards, my body folded forwards, and but first I felt the downcoat's feathers forming lumps like in an ancient pillow I remember as a child, like bouncing on a bed, like landing on a cloud. And though most of my body was soaked, my heart and head were dry, along with one good arm. How easy it was when I finally scrambled out. My shoes were squeaking, but I wasn't cold. I noticed something new. Water that looks cold doesn't have to be. Water spun through lakes and straits to fan out shallow in an Nile lagoon can hold the memory of summer's effervescence. And now it must signify something, this floating fall, this soft dunk of water. And so I mull it over, ponder. Am I born again or blessed? And to what purpose? Though first I must confess, I've lost my faith in easy signs, and my range of speculation narrows. I may be losing all my highs and lows, like the eagle's desperado. If feeling goes away, then nothing means nor matters. Yet I know my feelings haven't gone away. I'm only loved by lovely lyrics set to mournful tunes. I feel, therefore I am, though I must work with who I am. My soul must clap its hands and sing and louder sing, says the poet Yeats, for every tatter in its mortal dress. Could that be the septuagenarian skill that I'm awaiting, my soul to clap its hands and sing, to sing of places that I love from knowing them, through years of knowing them, to fancy myself an oracle of knowing them, now and way back when we skated across lagoons and under bridges to the mouth of the canal, where only a spit of sand stood between canal and river, red sun circle of slush, end of ice, dark pool, wind that cuts through earmuffs to have its way with summer's effervescence. And I see on my clock it's 7:51. I hope people have something to say. Helen. Oh, should we unmute everybody?
Well, I unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just have to tell you that I don't listen to you as a person just new to your poetry and your readings, because I'm probably a year older than you. I started out my life in right around Junction, and a little bit further up, and
she's a homegirl.
I really am. I'm, in the Polish neighborhood with all my aunts and uncles being around there. And that poem you read about the suburbs, my mother was determined that we would get to a better neighborhood. And they found a house that was all kind of broken down in the northwest side. The northwest side was getting to the suburbs, and fixed it up, and we went to, it was a different life, but it was so much of what you were describing, escaping to the stores and the nice little houses, even though they were. So I relate to so much of what you talk about in the Catholic schools and the going to Wayne State. And I was at the 250-year celebration of Detroit and have pictures of it. My brother was very good friends with one of the Michigan, that was in the parade. So it's your ability to note the minutia, the boots that you wore in the wintertime, and we had a coal furnace, and we had the coal coming in. So it's hard to put into words how much it's touched me to hear you speak. So yeah.
Thank you so much. And you can verify all of what I said.
Yeah, I mean, I took a little bit different turn, but the It really is. You write so, I don't have the words because I'm not a poet and I'm not a writer, but you just write so honestly, and I appreciate that. So that's all I had to say. Good to see you again. Thank you.
iPad. Francis, you're muted. It's in the left corner.
Okay, there we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I really wasn't, I was just waving to Helen because I kind of agree with a lot of what she said, although I didn't come to Detroit until I got married in I had my first child in 1963, but a lot of similar, the coal furnace and the neighborhoods and a lot of similar type things too, experiences that it was just delightful. And the way I really like the way you read also. It's yeah, you just kind of go right along and it's beautiful. And thank you.
Thank you. I never thought I'd learn to read on Zoom.
But you did.
Nancy. Nancy?
Hi, Mary. I just want to echo what's already been said about all the wonderful detail in your writing and beautiful imagery. So I really enjoyed it, and thank you. And I want to say hi to Pat and Ginny as well from workshop that we've all been in together.
That was a wonderful workshop.
Yeah. Great stuff, Mary.
It was all so vivid, and I grew up far away from from Detroit, but you really took me there, and I just appreciate how the vividness and your memory. I wondered did you keep diaries? Did you keep journals? How do you remember so vividly? Or is that just your superpower?
Well, my mother, in fact, I kind of skirted around it. She was eccentric. I mean, I think she's a character in literature now. I keep going back to her and adding more and, poking fun at her. But she was a hoarder. And my daughter, who's here on Zoom, when we cleaned up her house after she died, it actually took me years to clean up the house, but she had stuff like deals on rear end alignments, from 1904. She had those things, and things really help you remember. But then I ended, I had so much fun doing it, but I went through several ways to remember things, like the national events. If you can easily find what happened in the year that's national, that everybody knows, and then you say, where was I? And then that can help you remember the things my mother left. I mean, she never thought that they would be the source of my writing. But they were all crazy things that anybody in their right mind would have thrown out. But like the Holy Redeemer Weekly, which was a wonderful paper. She had odd issues of the Holy Redeemer Weekly. And of course, that led me to go up to the rectory and look through all of the Holy Redeemer Weeklies. And I got a lot of history. And so, so I didn't just have it without looking around for it. And the web now, we didn't, you know, you can see a picture of a 1948 Admiral TV just like that.
Mhm.
And so you can, that also makes you remember. So anyway, I don't want to go on. I've already gone on for.
Well, what a wonderful way you transformed your mother's eccentricity and habit of keeping everything.
I'm afraid I'm going to keep all I have of hers.
And
But
wait till I get to my mother.
Oh,
Kidding. What? No, it's in love. I mean, you write about her eccentricities, like, you know, it's not. She was great. She was a great person.
yeah, she was.
Yeah.
Well, Dan. Is it?
Thank you. Let me shift over to sociology for a minute, because your poem on the flight to the suburbs I found enlightening. I'm a little bit beyond that. I mean, I was out of high school in '67, so I was in that time era, but I wasn't in the inside of what you're saying is that it was not so much white flight from Detroit. Rather, it was escape to the suburbs from the factory town, from the warehouses, from the social setting of trucks going through the neighborhoods. Am I hearing you correctly? And if that's the case,
Yes.
if that's the case, why wasn't there a larger segment of the black population moving as well, or was there? Was that Pontiac? I mean, so help me understand the social racial time period you're talking about.
As I understand it, first of all, the building of the expressways and the making it easy to live 10, 15 miles away, you know, started a chain reaction kind of thing. And then having the expressways cut right through Chinatown, cut right through Mexican town, destroy Black Bottom and where the blacks were living, because up until the late 50s, they were not allowed to move into other neighborhoods. But then you had the blacks who were displaced going to 12th Street. The Jewish people who were on 12th Street went out to Dexter. The Irish people, in other words, it was like people were fleeing from different ethnic groups. And then before you know it, the tax base, ended up out in the suburbs. But I'm not a sociologist, but I know that the suburbs were sold, like 3-bedroom ranch house in Inkster, all for $99.90. I can't say it right. I never said it right. All for $9,999, and $99 moved you in. And there was the GI Bill for people who could get credit and make purchases like that.
Thank you.
And
you don't have to be an academic if you lived it and were sensitive enough to observe and understand which you are. I mean,
yeah. Well, the Catholics, the Holy Redeemer Parish in Southwest Detroit was at one point in the late 40s, early 50s, was the largest English-speaking parish in the world. And it was predominantly Irish. And this idea that people needed to move, that they'd be better off if they moved. But there was a pastor at Holy Redeemer who was a fine writer. He tried single-handedly. I just hope I'll find him in heaven somewhere, because he did not want people to move. He wanted them to stay, but they didn't stay.
Thank you, Mary. Anyone else?
Yeah, I just wanted to say how much I enjoyed your reading, Mary, and all the details like other people are saying as well. And I just make it really short because I know it's time to move on. But what I loved about the way you talked about your mother in the poem, where you quote her a lot, And I thought there was so much love in that poem, you know, that was being expressed. And also the image of a woman who loses her husband and then just blossoms, you know, all these things start happening and, you know, she's kind of freed in some way. So I don't know if I'm getting that right, but it was, I thought that was really wonderful. So thank you for that and everything else too.
Thank you. You know, I sometimes wonder, like, because I mean, I don't have a need to write about my mother too much, but so much comes into my head, and there's a poem, and I'm thinking, how many poems do I have to write about this woman? I have her in a poem where she's standing on the shore of the river with Aretha Franklin and Madame Cadillac, and they're the three women of Detroit. Really, I didn't read that one. I could have read it, but I
All right.
didn't know, it was so fantastic. I didn't know whether you guys would appreciate it.
Anyone else have a final comment for Mary? Okay, we are going to move now into our open mic